Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Send Your Kids to College podcast. We're here with Jeff Boron, certified college planning expert. It's the second episode. If you haven't listened to the first one, go back. There's a lot of stuff about the scholarship, which we'll get back into next time of the year. We just wanted to talk about today about FAFSA and get back into the college money talk, because every time of the year the college money talk comes up, but it depends on what time of the year. And right now we're in what's known in your world as forms season.
Forms season starts October 1st every year. And what's funny is when you look at college forms, most people have heard of the FAFSA, and there's a lot of myths about there, which we'll talk about. There's also, if you live in New York State and going to a New York State school, there's also New York State TAP. There is New York State Excelsior Scholarship, if you qualify for that. And then for about 350 colleges across the U.S., unfortunately, many of them in the Northeast, there's an additional format for some of these mostly private schools called the CSS Profile. And most parents, most students have never heard of that, but it is a requirement at many schools.
Yeah, and as we talked, the college money talk is sort of an ongoing process, and we're going to break that down a lot here on the podcast because there's so much that goes into it. And having done this for so many years, you start to see things happen cyclically, I would say, over the years based on our discussions. So, restate for the viewer what that college money talk is.
So the college money talk is probably the most important aspect of college planning and the relationship between the parent and their student. So if you look at what happens with college, the student and many times has done their part. They've got great grades in high school, they prepared well for the SAT or ACT, and they're a good academically qualified student. Now we start looking at colleges, and without looking at price many times, but we're going to some of these colleges because they're good schools, and the college money talk hasn't happened. What should happen first is that discussion between the parents and the student. First of all, how much are the parents going to help contribute towards college, if anything, if they're able to? Where is that money coming from? So maybe parents will dedicate a portion of their income or their salaries to help pay for college, $500, $1,000 a month, whatever that might be. Maybe they've got some savings, 529 plans, other types of savings, and they're going to use that. But really, what's the breakdown? What is the total amount that the parents can help the student with, again, if anything? And then for the student, really understanding what colleges you're looking at, what type of merit money you're going to have, how much you have to contribute to college, and then the dreaded subject of how much would you take out in loans. But it really revolves around having a plan before you start getting emotionally attached to different colleges.
And one kind of player in this game, that you mentioned to me before was the school guidance counselor. And, talk a little bit about what role they play, because obviously, the heart's probably always in the right place for the student, but, touch on that a little bit, because obviously they are a big part of this process and parents may lean on them typically, but how do they work into the mix?
So the counselors many times will advise students to look at schools which are, they'll easily be accepted at, and then some reach colleges, some stretch colleges, and some very expensive colleges. Remember, the counselor is not responsible for the financial position of the student or the parents or how to pay for it. They're looking at schools which are great name schools, but just might not be in the budget. So it's almost like, Jeremy, I said, you're going to go out for your first car, you're 16 years old. A great car to go test drive would be that Porsche 911. Maybe that's a great car. They're absolutely right. But they don't get into, nor can they get into discussion of how are we going to pay for this.
And that, unfortunately, we talked about how you've seen over the years, sometimes, when it comes full circle and that student does decide, I'm going to take out loans, they go get that education from that dream school, and then they come out of it with a bill that they probably weren't considering, and then oftentimes that resentment comes back to the parents sometimes.
Right, because remember, we're dealing with teenagers at this point going to college, and many of them don't have a great grasp and understanding of money. They think, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get this very high-paying job. Who cares if I take out loans? The reality is you really want to be cautious about taking out loans and getting into debt. And what I've seen after the fact for students and parents that haven't worked with me originally is they come out and they've got 3 to 4 times more debt than their first year salary, and the numbers just don't work. That student typically has to move back home with mom and dad. There's a little bit of resentment. I would have never taken out these loans, I hear the student, if I would have known that I would have had this kind of monthly payment, and I just can't afford it.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but that's what we're here for. That's what this podcast is here for, is to hopefully help the people of Western New York understand the value of what Send Your Kids to College can do for you. One huge thing that they can do for you is help out with one of the biggest first steps, which if you have a younger child or you've had, a kid through college before, you probably heard of the term FAFSA. But, we wanted to talk a little bit about FAFSA today because it's the time of the year. But also we wanted to break down a few myths, one of which, a big one, is, I pulled these common myths from the internet. But these are sort of some high-level things that a lot of parents ask or misconstrue, rather. The FAFSA being only for federal student aid is a common myth. Can you talk on a little bit about that? Because if I don't know what I'm doing, where do I start?
So we start out with a lot of parents say, I make too much money to bother with this, and you couldn't be further from the truth. The first thing is, if we take a typical household and they've got an adjusted gross income, let's say of $150,000 a year, they will come out with a number called your expected family contribution, which will qualify them for financial aid at virtually every private school we're looking at. May not be the SUNYs, but then again, some of the other money that's available for the SUNY students like TAP or Excelsior, you need to file a FAFSA first. The other thing that happens is FAFSAs are typically needed for many merit scholarships that the colleges award. You won't be considered for those merit scholarships unless you filed a FAFSA for that particular school. Finally, what I tell parents with extremely high incomes or high net worth clients, colleges want a percentage of full pay clients. So what I mean by that is, let's say their income is $500,000 a year. They're not going to be a needs-based client, but they're a highly desirable client for that college. And what the colleges will typically do is come up with some type of an award, let's call it a presidential scholarship or whatever it might be, to attract those parents, which is tuition discounting, because they want to get you as the parent, the high net worth parent, as opposed to you going somewhere else with your money.
That's really interesting. And that was another big one was, I make too much or my parents make too much.
The bottom line, Jeremy, is every single student going to college should file these forms. It's absolutely necessary.
And one that I didn't, kind of think of, the student having to wait until they're accepted to a school, and the fact that this isn't just 1 year. This is something that you have to do
every single year. So we start October 1st. Many times the students at that point are working on what schools they're applying to. They won't get accepted until early in the spring of the following year. So you want to get that in. What happens a lot to us is we get calls, we get emails, add this school, add this school. It's very easy to add a school later if your son or daughter decides to apply to a different school or another school or additional schools. We can add that, but the base information stays the same. But get it done, get it in. That's the message.
So it's something you obviously have to do if anybody is going to go to school. It's something you have to do, and I'm sure it can get frustrating for the parent or student. What do you find? Is this something you find more that parents struggle with, students try, and maybe they don't have the parents to get involved, or how does it look? And how does that look from your angle in terms of what can you do for them?
Well, a lot of people make some common mistakes of, I'll have my tax preparer, the person that does my income taxes, do this, or it doesn't look that hard, I'll do it myself. What they don't know is, if I put this in this box, it drives the following result. And you want to take a look at understanding the whole system, and then if there's adjustments that can be made prior to filing the FAFSA, make those adjustments. If you're a needs-based candidate and you can get your expected family contribution down by certain moves, take a look at making those moves. You have to first understand, are you a needs eligible client or are you a non-needs eligible client? And there are different strategies for each one, but understanding how the numbers that you put on that form will affect the financial aid decisions is probably the first thing, and most people don't understand that.
And obviously, being a nonprofit, people might not understand how a nonprofit works, but being a nonprofit, where does this money go if I were to come to Send Your Kids to College and have you guys fill out my forms? Small charge, but what does that money go towards?
So we charge $79, which is for a comprehensive package of the FAFSA, the New York State TAP, and Excelsior. So you get 3 forms for $79. Very, very cost effective for the parents to do. We use that money to fund our annual scholarship, the Young Achiever Scholarship. Right now we're in the process of interviewing candidates for the 2021 award, and it goes to a good cause. So we dedicate our time. You pay $79, which is actually a contribution towards the scholarship fund, and we will make sure the forms are filed correctly and timely, and you get the full package back. You understand what was submitted, and we do it every year for people.
Yeah, and as we've sort of shown on the social media and on the blog at sendyourkidstocollege.org, oftentimes when you work with Send Your Kids to College, some of that money looks a lot better. We've looked at some of the case summaries and things like that. So it's not only just the forms, but what are a couple other things that might happen if someone were to turn to you guys?
Well, one of the things that we'll do is, the forms is kind of a last step. We like to do the planning in advance and actually help maybe steer to some colleges which will be much more cost effective for the student. We preach return on investment, and as I'm interviewing these students, it's really easy. I say, is college an investment? And they always agree, yes, of course it's an investment. It's an investment of time and investment of money. Before you'd make any investment, let's say you're going to go buy a business or an apartment building to rent out, you want to know what that return is. So the return is going to be your salary when you come out of college. And then you have to do some math. Is the return on that investment, do those numbers work? Am I spending $250,000 to get a $30,000 a year job, or am I spending $250,000 to get a $300,000 a year job? And you've got to just do the math. There's no right or wrong college or career. It's just the two have to sync up. So we do an entire planning process. We help the parents understand what they can afford to help pay for college by looking at their comprehensive financial picture. And then we work backward. College is one milestone, but by the time most parents have their last student graduate from college, they've got a very short window until they want to hit the next milestone, which is retirement. We want to make sure that they're not robbing from retirement or forcing their children to take out excessive student loans in order to do their college career.
Yeah, and as you can see, anybody out there around Western New York, it's clear that working with someone like Jeff can be beneficial, not only to help get through the frustration, but also help your student become a great adult. Because this is obviously such an important part. A lot of people probably think, all right, I got the kid into college, now I'm done. But I think it's pretty clear that's not the last step. Is there anything else you wanted to add today, Jeff, regarding FAFSA or the College Money Talk?
Well, our FAFSA calendar fills up pretty fast, so I would give us a call, get on the calendar. It's very quick. You stop and provide some information. We do some of them via Zoom calls or email. I generally like to talk to people. It takes about a half-hour meeting, and then you get a package in the mail back of all your completed forms, all the documentation, and everything you need for backup, and all your login IDs and login credentials. So it's a pretty quick process. We've been doing it for years. I'm so old that I started doing them when they were on paper.
That should be reason enough for people out there to come to you, because there's nobody else around Western New York that can do it like this.
No, like I tell people, they always say, well, my neighbor put his kid through college. Well, first of all, we don't know if your neighbor did it correctly. And second of all, I'm the neighbor that's put thousands of kids through college. So I've seen it all. We work with a number of colleges, the same colleges every year. We know how they play, and we can give some good advice and good help. And it goes to a good cause for our scholarship.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And thank you, folks of Western New York. Stay tuned to the next episode. You can find this at sendyourkidstocollege.org, and remember to follow and like on Facebook and Instagram.